The story kicks off in an emergency room where our protagonist, Jin Leshin, is currently battling death. Jin came into the world with rotten luck as Truck Kun ended his parents' life subscription, making Jin an orphan. After completing his education, he spent the next 20 years slaving away in a company with low pay. The doctors yell at Jin to keep fighting, but knowing he never experienced a woman's warmth completely fills all boy with dejection. After dying, Jin finally awakens only to find himself in a lavish room. This instantly shocks his middle-class heart. Suddenly a blue screen pops up, welcoming Jin to a magical world called Eldra. As he tries to reach for the screen, his head starts to pulsate, causing him to look for help. That's when he notices a reflection of a hot girl boss staring right at him. A week later, Jin gets served tea by his maid, who addresses him as Master Rain. He politely thanks his curvaceous maid Lee and reflects on how his life changed. Turns out, he died and was born as Rain Edgar, who is the third son of Grand Duke Aldarion. He has two siblings, a brother and a sister. However, since he's the youngest sibling, he gets pampered by his new family, which prompts him to think if this is some sort of remedy for his past life. Jin now as Rain further thinks about his new home, Eldria, a world which functions with magic. On Eldria's continent of Caradorial, humans coexist with other races like elves and dwarves. Among them is the Edgar family, which owns a vast land with 1 million subjects. So naturally, as a noble, Rain has the finest clothes, but what makes his life sweet is his personal maid, Lee, whose milk bags can eradicate world hunger. Just when Rain thinks his life couldn't get any better, Lee tells him he's summoned by his father. Upon arriving at his father's office, Rain greets his Lord Father, Aldarion, who instantly tells him that he's at the age of having his own territory. Despite Rain's shocked face, Aldarion continues by informing him he's going to take over the Northwest Territory. He further informs Rain that while the territory is safe, the issue of food production has been hard to tackle. Aldarion concludes his speech by disclosing that while their lands are yet secured, the future of the Caradorial Empire appears grim. Rain looks down, knowing his father is telling the truth as the royal family is in decline because of political corruption. This further leads Rain to reflect on how he has experienced love and care by his family, which makes him want to protect his family. Meanwhile, Aldarion wonders if he gave his son constipation by talking business. Just when Aldarion assures Rain he doesn't have to worry his small brain, Rain enthusiastically asks him if solving the food problem will ensure their territory's safety. While Aldarion thinks his son is naive to think a food problem can be solved with enthusiasm alone, Rain knows he's not relying on passion alone, as he possesses the wisdom of centuries of human industrial revolution. Laced with confidence, Rain assures Aldarion to leave the matters of food shortage to him. Ashling City, ruled by Aldarion, stands at a critical crossroads where 3 distinct realms converge. To the north lies the domain of Soren, the Grand Duke. To the west, the lands of the elves. And to the south, the endless expanse of the ocean. Positioned at the heart of these borders, Ashling City frequently finds itself caught in the relentless flames of war. And it is because of this constant warfare that turned Ashling's once fertile lands barren and bleak. Unfortunately, because of such harsh conditions, a lot of people fled, leaving Ashling's population dwindling. At the present, Rain and Lee are journeying towards their new home. On the way, Rain wonders how he'll gather the labor force to kickstart his industrial revolution. As he realizes the need for more men, Rain's mind drifts towards the fact that he now possesses a strange ability. An ability which allows him to assess the stats of the person being scanned. Since he honed his skill back home, Rain now has a pretty good idea of the people around him, which further makes him realize that he needs to focus on recruiting talented individuals. In the meantime, Lee looks at her master with a worrisome look. Turns out, before leaving their main estate, Aldarion had ordered Lee to keep a strict eye on Rain so he doesn't cause any trouble in the territory. Meanwhile, in Alising's City Lord's mansion, the City Lord discusses Rain's arrival and asks the man in front of him if they should make their move, since Rain is known to be the apple of the Edgar family. However, in response, the masked man tells the sharp-tongued Lord to wait, as they haven't yet received instructions from the master. In response, the City Lord shares his concerns about Rain discovering their financial frauds, yet the veiled man assures the City Lord a pampered noble like Rain wouldn't understand anything about finances. To further hide their malpractices, the cloaked man tells the City Lord to just give Rain some random accounts which will confuse him. After instructing him to cater to Rain's whims, the mysterious man takes his leave, thinking it's time for Aldarion to pay for his crimes. In the meantime, Rain and Lee arrive at the city. However, upon arrival, Rain is filled with misery as he looks at the once cultivated city now desolate. He asks Lee to give him a map of Ashling and immediately tries to find solutions for their problems when he suddenly hears a commotion. Turning his head to the side, he finds a young girl begging her father to stop gambling. She pleads with the old man to spare the money which is for her mother's treatment, but the man refuses to listen, assuring the girl he'll surely win big. Just when he's about to give his daughter a knuckle sandwich, Rain intervenes and punches him instead. Yet he quickly cries about his hand being in pain. Lee quickly tends to Rain and tells him that if he's going to act like a soy boy later, he shouldn't hit people. Rain mumbles that it was impulsive of him and then orders Lee to tend to the girl. In the meantime, he lectures the old man, telling him it's because of fathers like him that young girls call crusty old men daddy. The man grits his teeth in anger and demands Rain to reveal his identity. Rain ignores him and warns the old gambler that if he ever sets foot in a casino again, he's going to have someone chop off his head like King Henry's wives. Hearing this, the man quickly flees while Rain returns to check up on the gambler's daughter. While he's at it, he checks her physical state with his ability. Rain discovers that the girl's name is Lillian and her special attribute is farming harvesting. This instantly prompts Rain to recruit her. He further tells Lillian to take his carriage to get medicine for her mother. Flabbergasted, Lillian tells Rain she's dirty and would soil his carriage. However, Rain assures her it's okay and asks her how there's a casino when there's so much poverty. Lillian reveals, last fall, the Grand Duke of Sorin attacked the town which led to the demise of many soldiers. Then, a great flood destroyed all of the land and crops. After so many calamities, the civilians have been living a hellish life. Even finding a meal has been troublesome. Hearing this, Rain asserts he must find a way to know how much productive forces they have. With that, he makes up his mind to first visit the city lord to see how much revenue he has. Rain turns to ask Lillian about the lord's address when suddenly a horse rider with a whip angrily cusses at the civilians. Before the idiot can strike Rain, Lee takes him into her protective embrace, which only suffocates him. Upon regrouping, Rain asks Lillian if she knows who that idiot was. Lillian quickly identifies the man as the young lord of the Edwin family. Furthermore, all the casinos in Ashling City belong to his family. Realizing the Edwin family must be rich, Rain smirks as he thinks about getting development funds from them. Now determined, he asks Lillian to lead the way to the casino. However, the peasant girl warns him that if he goes to the casino, he'll return piss broke. Reassuring Lillian, Rain states he can handle the casino. Seeing Rain confidently walk ahead, Lillian wonders just how powerful he is. Upon arrival, Rain looks at the casona and thinks how he's going to demolish the place. He steps in and finds everyone indulging in degeneracy, which fills Rain with disgust. Just then, Lee whispers, informing Rain that the soldiers have surrounded the building. However, Rain tells her to hold her horses as he wants to meet the big shot. A dealer approaches Rain, asking him if he'd like to play. Rain responds back, asking the dealer if he can show him to something easy. The dealer leads Rain to a table where another offers him 2 free chips. As the game begins, the dealers exchange wicked smirks, knowing it's rigged. Predictably, Rain loses, but when he tries to leave, the dealer sinisterly demands payment for the supposed debt. Unfazed, Rain tells the clown he doesn't owe him any money, but the dealer retorts that he had graciously let him borrow those 2 chips, so now he must pay. Rain returns, saying that he told him it was on the house. Yet, the dealer remains strong in his position, stating that nothing is free and each chip is worth 100 gold coins. His wickedness doesn't stop as he tells Rain if he doesn't have money, he can leave his busty maid here. Lillian quickly interjects, revealing that the dealer is lying as each chip is only worth 1 silver coin. Enraged, the dealer is about to give Lillian an abused wife look when Rain punches him. In the meantime, the peasants take this opportunity to steal more chips. Noticing the commotion, the young lord of the Edwin family arrives. With a look of annoyance, the wretched noble orders his goons to beat up the peasants. As the fight starts, Lillian thinks it's because of her that Rain and Lee are in trouble. She thinks about how Rain told the doctor to save her mother, which fills her with determination to help the young master. She angrily turns to face Veserlo, stating that she won't let him scam Rain. The onlookers worry for Lillian as they know anyone who made Veserlo mad always suffered a bad ending. Ticked off, Veserlo asks Lillian if she has something to say. Lillian rips Veserlo a new one by stating how he destroyed countless families with his scams. As she tells the Lord she won't let him scam Rain, Veserlo prepares to slap her. However, when Lillian opens her eyes, she finds Rain grabbing Veserlo's hand. Using his ability, Rain realizes that not only is Veserlo completely useless, but his royalty score is also 0. However, he mentally makes a note to not rile the Edwin family as they can start a revolt. Veserlo asks Rain if he's against his policies, but Rain plays cool and states that he knows about survival of the fittest, so whoever wins the fight shall have the last laugh. Smirking, Veserlo asks if he knows who he is. Rain states he doesn't need to know him and claps his hands. A bunch of soldiers barge in as Rain tells Veserlo his words are the law here. Elsewhere, a man named Lucas tells another lord named Adrian how he's hoping Rain would fancy his daughter. Hearing this, the lord realizes Lucas is in a mood to pimp his daughter. Before meeting Lucas, the lord has ordered the town lord to scare Rain off during the banquet. Adrian's thoughts then drift off to Veserlo's absence as he thinks about forging an alliance with him when Rain graces the hall. Almost instantly, Rain is surrounded by the heads of wealthy families, all offering him gifts and their daughter. Rain ignores them all and gets down to business, unveiling a blueprint. He announces to the lords that this is how they're going to build a dam. The lords, being illiterate, ask Rain what a dam is, so he tells them not to worry and goes on to explain. Rain begins by saying how he took the time to look over Ashling's geographical location and found out there's a great flood every year because of the North River. So if they were to build a dam there, they'll be able to stop the flood during the rainy seasons and water the crops during the droughts. Adrain, hearing this, is impressed, knowing that Ashling can easily prosper like this. The lords ask Rain what he wants from them, so the young master states he needs funds to build the dam. Almost instantly, the lords sigh, stating they have no money. Observing the conversation, Adruan realizes that while Rain is bright, he's also naive to think the lords would help him. Rain continues by assuring the lords they don't need to worry about money, as he'll show them how to generate revenue. He further reveals how he has 50,000 gold coins after raiding a casino, so he plans on just raiding more casinos. A commotion arises amongst the nobles as they wonder if Rain raided the casino they've invested in. However, most importantly, they turn towards Adrian, knowing that it's him who runs all the casinos. The nobles collectively deem Rain as a moron. Adrain finally addresses Rain and states he can't ban casinos since it's against the laws of the Caradorial nation. The fellow nobles join in, backing Adrian as they tell Rain it's unlawful of him to shut down casinos. With odds stacked against him, Rain firmly tells the nobles he's going to give them all one last chance. Adrian steps in and tells Rain his father won't forgive him for his reckless behavior. The lords once again chime in like NPCs, telling Rain he needs to stay in his lane. Rain smirks and tells the lords that since they want to talk law, he will do exactly that. He orders the soldiers to detain them. Rain presents 2 tied-up goons to Adrian, which he recognizes as the men next to Veserlo. Rain then asks Adrian if he knows the men, which the cunning lord instantly denies and asks Rain what he's trying to do. With a smile, Rain reveals how these goons tried to murder him this afternoon. He further states how the hoodlums even told him they were backed by someone powerful. Adrian becomes constipated as Rain tells the soldiers to untie the goons so they can run to their master. The entire crowd falls silent, knowing the goons belong to Veserlo. Knowing that if the men decide to speak, he'll be ruined, Adrian picks up a dagger and slays the goons in the name of justice. After murdering the minions, Adrian pretends to apologize to Rain, stating that he was so angry on his behalf, he has to punish the criminals. Rain just smiles and tells Adrian that he's truly a good noble with his strong sense of justice. Just when Adrian breathes a sigh of relief, Rain tells the guards to bring out the big fish. Veserlo curses everyone and asks to be let free. He thrashes around and threatens Rain how he's going to make him go through the Russian sleep experiment once he's freed. Rain just smirks, asking Veserlo that he now wants to torture him. Veserlo confidently states how no one in Ashling can stand against him. Rain bursts into laughter, commending Veserlo for being brave. He turns to face Adrian and asks him what he thinks of the fine gentleman in front of him. Upon seeing Adrian, Veserlo calls him daddy and tells Rain he has no idea what sort of trouble he is in. As Veserlo continues to babble, Adrian loses himself and curses his son to keep his mouth shut. He then orders him to kneel, confusing Veserlo. Adrian then begs Rain to spare his stupid son and even offers to give his entire wealth. Upon hearing Rain's name, Veserlo recalls that his father told him to get closer to the Grand Duke's son, Rain. Now nervous, he asks Rain if he's the Grand Duke's son. In response, Rain asks him why else he would have so many soldiers in his possession. Realizing his mistake, Vicerlo quickly kneels while Adrian begs for mercy. Rain simply tells Adrian to just give him what he acquired illegally over the years. Adrian thanks Rain for being merciful, but then turns on the city lord, Eldrick, and informs Rain about his rebellion. Rain, however, angrily tells Adrian that he was going to spare him, but now he's slandering the city lord. He then tells his soldiers to execute the people spouting nonsense, making Eldrick happy as he thinks Rain is stupid. He steps up and tells Rain that he's completely loyal to him and his father. Rain assures Eldrick that he believes him while assessing him with his ability and knowing how greedy he is. In his study, Rain goes through the documents when Lee arrives with his black tea. Thanking his maid, Rain remarks how the lords have been filling their coffers with the tax money. Lee then asks Rain what he plans to do with the city lord who is planning a rebellion. As she expresses her concern, Rain tells Lee to calm down as they do not need to worry yet. He continues by saying that while he knows Eldrick is planning a rebellion, he can't show his hand yet. Lee dumbly asks why, and so Rain states he doesn't yet know who is working for Eldrick. That's why it's best if the city lord thinks he's a naive rich brat. The next day at the city lord's mansion, Malcolm the wizard expresses his anger. Eldrick tries to calm him, but Malcolm tells him that he doesn't need to take Rain's side, as even the Grand Duke needs to show respect to the wizards. Internally, Eldrick smirks in delight, knowing that Rain has pissed off the magical guild with his actions, so now he'll be without friends in Ashling. Later, at Rain's mansion, he makes engineering drawings when Lee informs him about Malcolm's arrival. Confused, Rain shrugs and meets Temu Gandalf, who instantly asks him why he'd insult the magical guild. Surprised, Rain asks him how he has insulted the magical guild. Enraged, Malum shows him his recruitment letter stating that wizards, elderly and disabled aren't allowed to participate in building the dam. Unfazed, Rain asks Malcolm how is building a dam an insult to the wizards. Thinking Rain is playing hard to get, Malcolm points out how he said wizards can't participate in this project, which is clearly an insult to the magical guild. Rain falls silent, realizing Malcolm is brain dead. The wizard continues his tantrum, demanding a justifiable reason for his racism against the wizards. He warns Rain that every wizard will boycott him. Before answering, Rain assesses his stats and learns Malcolm is quite loyal, which means someone must have riled him up. He calmly tells Malcolm there's been a misunderstanding as he meant no offense. Rain reveals that he has 3 reasons for not hiring the wizards. 1. Their amount of mana is limited when they've a deadline to meet. Secondly, wizards are damn expensive, and lastly, wizards live lavishly because of the guild while the civilians starve, which is why he wanted to provide employment for the civilians. Hearing this, Malcolm states magic makes one superior, therefore the civilians deserve to be beneath the wizards. Rain sighs and states that he wants everyone to know he believes in equality where wizards are neither superior or inferior than the civilians. However, Malcolm doesn't like that and asks Rain to take that back or he'll incur their wrath. Rain sharply reminds Malcolm of his station as the land's lord and tells him that Lee might cut his head for this insolence. The wizard asks Rain what's the meaning of this, and he politely reveals that it is the law. No one can defy the land's lord. Retracting his attitude, Malcolm quickly apologizes before he's headless in more than one way. Still examining Malcolm's stats, Rain realizes his loyalty hasn't decreased. He tells Lee to let Malcolm go when the blue window alerts him that he's completed a quest successfully. Moments later, Malcolm steps out and is greeted by a curious Eldrick. Malcolm reveals to him how Rain chased him out. The wicked lord jumps on this opportunity and tells Malcolm he has a mighty plan. Eldrick states that when the peasants refused to work for Rain, he'd have no choice but to come to the wizards. Confused, Malcolm asks him why the peasants would refuse a good offer. Malcolm answers, saying that all peasants do is laze around, so Rain is bound for disappointment. Malcolm disagrees with the plan and says he doesn't intend to sabotage Rain's plan over this. Eldrick loses his cool and states how the peasants are losers and deserve to starve. He also tells Malcolm that the peasants would never help Rain build a dam. Meanwhile, in the city, the peasants read Rain's offer of 3 meals a day, manageable work timings, and fair wages. One of the peasants asks another if Master Rain really is that generous. The other peasant responds that it must be a trap since nobles are known for their trickery. In the end, they both refuse to go, fearing they'll die. Lillian, hearing this, angrily tells the peasants to not slander Rain, who promised her a better living standard for all. The men break into a laugh as they tell Lillian to go to the kitchen. One of the peasants even accuses her of having a crush on Rain. Ignoring all, Lillian tells the recruiter she and her father would like to apply. However, the recruiter states that her father can apply, but she can't since she's underage. He turns to face Lillian's dad and informs him that he'll be paid 10 copper coins at the end of his shift. Lillian then tells her father to not slack off, and he pats her head in response as he's internally grateful to Rain. He also tells Lillian to take care of her mother as she's sick. Hearing this, the recruiter informs Lillian and her father that Rain has ordained that the family members of anyone who's working in the dam project may temporarily relocate to the workers' quarters. He also states that this is only for the laborers slaving for the dam construction. Eternally grateful, Lillian's father bow in gratitude as the recruiter consoles him and reveals he can pick any quarter he likes. Seeing all this, the distrustful peasants immediately decide to sign for the construction project. Meanwhile, in his mansion, Rain receives a reward for his quest completion, which is a blueprint for batteries. Displeased, Rain states that his reward is useless without an electricity generator. He's then given another quest of getting 5 high-stats characters. Rain wonders how he'll recruit such people. He thinks of Lee but realizes he can't train her as she doesn't have room to grow. In the end, he decides to look for talents in the city. Suddenly, Lillian barges in, revealing how everyone at the construction site is slacking off. Before arriving at Rain's mansion, Lillian hears from his father how no one has energy to work. Lillian rages on the peasants, asking them why they're slacking when they've received such kindness from Rain. One of the peasants yawns and tells Lillian they're just low on energy. Another states that since they've been out of work for so long, they're experiencing instant exhaustion syndrome. In the end, they all reveal they'll feel better if they rest for a day. Enraged, Lillian heads to Rain to snitch, who arrives at the construction site. He assesses Lillian's father, Rock's stats, and realizes he's cursed like all the other peasants. Using his ability, Rain uses prospecting, which allows the host to analyze any object. He orders his ability system to analyze the geological condition of the area. Seconds later, the system shows him an anomaly in the land, so he asks a peasant to dig in that area. After digging, a boulder with a cursed crystal is unveiled. Lee wonders if Rain's a genius since she couldn't detect the magical presence of the crystal. Rain orders the crystal to be put in a box and then asks Lee how to get rid of curses. Lee reveals that usually people go to the church where a priest removes the curse, or they can have a high-level wizard do it for them. After thinking for a moment, Rain tells Lillian to bring her father as they'll see a priest at once. When Lillian worries about her father, Rain assures her whoever did this will be punished, assuming it's Malcolm. Arriving at church, where they're greeted by the elven priestess, Ayuria. Masking his surprise over her not being human, Rain reveals to Ayuria that Rock has been cursed. Ayuria inspects Rock and confirms that Rock indeed has been cursed. Rain asks her to remove it and Ayuria quickly obliges. Once the curse has been lifted, Rock enthusiastically tells Rain he's going to finish all of his work quota today. Rain assures Rock to take it easy and then shows Ayuria the crystal they got from the site. The elf reveals the dark crystal is the most common magical crystal. She further reveals that a lot of magic has been stored inside the crystal, but it's meant to be more of a prank than a curse, as the crystal is capable of murdering everyone on site. When Rain asks if it's easy to make a crystal like that, Ayuria states that it's easier for a high-level wizard. Ayuria also lets on about knowing about the dam construction, which alerts Rain. However, Ayuria states that since the dam can make everyone's life easier, it's natural that she knows. Hearing this, Rain realizes he must teach Malcolm a lesson for messing with him. He turns to Ayuria and asks her if she knows how to remove the curse from the entire construction site. Ayuria tells Rain that he was able to locate the crystal today, but the culprit can easily put more crystals. Rain sighs, knowing Malcolm is proving to be a real pain in the butt. Seeing Rain troubled, Ayuria states she knows a weird girl who might be able to help. Seconds later, Rain and Lee arrive at Lady Selena's manor, who is the former president of the Wizards Guild. However, just as he knocks, a huge explosion occurs from within the mansion. A silhouette of a woman arrives, grumbling how she won't stop until she's successful. After laying out his problem to Selena, Rain is met with refusal as the wizard states she's busy researching for a new magical device. Rain asks her if she's making a vibrating wand, but Selena tells him Hitachi has already created one. Lee coldly warns Selena to be respectful towards Rain, but in response, Selena tells Lee she has good magical energy. So much so, she offers Lee to become her assistant, and in return she'll help Rain. Enraged, Lee tells Selena that she'll teach her how to be respectful. Before matters escalate, Rain calms Lee, reminding her of their business. Rain inquires about the device she's making, and Selena reveals she's trying to make a device that can store electric magic within her. Now deeply interested, Rain asks her if she's been successful, but Selena states all she's gotten is explosions. After a pause, Rain asks Selena if he helps her, would she return the favor. Thinking Rain's a goofball, Selena tries to shoo him away, but Rain restates that he's serious and wants her help with the Wizards Guild in return. Selena sighs in defeat and tells Rain that if he helps her, she'll make Malcolm and the Magical Guild his loyal servants. However, if he fails, then he dies. With the lithium iron phosphate battery blueprint in hand, Rain creates a device, but Selena expresses her distrust over Rain's creation. Rain assures her to just try it out and asks Selena to release her electricity. As Selena reluctantly releases her energy in the battery, she's surprised to find it still functioning. Rain smiles and tells Selena that the battery can hold even more electricity. Irked by Rain's arrogance, Selena releases a monstrous amount of magic into the battery. But instead of teaching Rain a lesson, she ends up wearing herself down. Rain himself takes a look and realizes his battery can easily power an electric vehicle. Selena then asks Rain if he can also use electric magic. Rain reveals that not only can he use electric magic, but he can even make everyone in Aisling use electric magic as well. Selena calls this bull and asks Rain how that would be possible. Yet Rain confidently states he has more powering batteries. He also tells Selena if she helps him, he'll show her a world where everyone can use magic. Meanwhile, sassy Princess Malcolm waits for Rain to come beg him, but instead of Rain, Selena arrives. Terrified of the baddie, Malcolm asks what she's doing here. Entering with her Louis Vuitton, Selena asks Malcolm if he's trying to rebel against the Grand Duke's family. Horrified, Malcolm states he'd never dare, but Selena grabs him by his clothes and asks him what tricks he has played on Rain's construction site. Scared out of his mind, Malcolm reveals how he gathered all the mages and told them how Rain thinks they're all dummies. Once everyone was furious, he had them create crystals that could cast curses and teleported the crystals underneath the construction ground. Malcolm confirms that he just wanted Rain to think the peasants are lazy and wizards are a better choice. He begs Selena to forgive him, who cusses him for being so naive. Confused, Malcolm asks what she means, but Selena ignores him and tells Malcolm to call his mages back. As Malcolm hurries away, Selena calls Rain, informing him the problem has been dealt with. Selena further asks Rain if he wants Eldrick out of the way, but Rain states that he wants Eldrick to reveal the bigger fish. Since she's Team Rain, Selena tells him to call her if he has new projects for her. Rain assures her he'll call her like your douchey ex, which makes Selena happy. Back at the City Lord's mansion, Eldrick asks the masked man what they should do with Rain. The man reveals that they should worry about the dam, as they can't let the people of Aisling City prosper. Eldrick assures the man he already has a trap waiting for Rain. He reveals how he has been pressuring the nobles to raise the prices of grain, but the masked man asks if the nobles will listen to him. Eldrick states that since Rain dried up their coffers at the banquet, they'd love to make more behind the scenes. In the end, Rain wouldn't have enough money to finish the dam project. Back at the city, Lillian and the peasants are kicked out for not having money for grain. The seller angrily tells Lillian that he can raise the prices however he likes. This upsets Lillian, who had promised Rain to not worry about getting food for them. She angrily asks the fat seller if he's not afraid of Rain. He cunningly tells her that he can't do anything to honest business people. Meanwhile, Ayuria gets a wind of how the prices of grain have tripped and is furious. She asks her subordinate Illyria to take what grain they have back while she figures something out. She also hands her a pouch of gold and instructs her to do as told. Suddenly, Lee arrives with Rain, who asks Ayuria if she's interested in cutting a deal with him. Curious, Ayuria asks Rain what business he would have with her. Rain assures her that an elf like her should not be tense. Ayuria sternly says there are no elves at the human capital. However, Rain reassures them that he knows she and Illyria are elves, and he bears no animosity towards them. Sighing, Ayuria asks him what business he has with them, and Rain states it is regarding food supplies. Ayuria apologizes for her bluntness, but states that it's beyond her abilities. Curious, Rain asks her what she means. Ayuria then reveals that in Aisling, food is controlled by the big four noble families who have controlled the city's grain for over a century. She also says the recent price hike is probably because he intimidated a lot of nobles at the banquet. More curious than ever, Rain asks her how she knows Aisling's politics so well. Ayuria reveals that she's been a city girl for 120 years. She also says that if he hadn't riled up the nobles at the banquet, they could have had a leeway. Looking all grim, Ayuria states how food was already scarce due to floods and war. But now, with the prices so steep, her people wouldn't survive the winters. Yet, Rain confidently assured Ayuria that in half a month, the prices of grain will be cheaper than it was before. Elsewhere in the Klein family mansion, the head of the family, Augustus, triumphantly holds a banquet for incurring profit. The heads of the 4 prominent families thank Augustus for including them in his plan. As they toast to their success, a butler informs Augustus of Rain's invitation to a banquet. The lords, now alert, wonder if Rain's coming for them. They ask Augustus what should be done as they don't intend to lose their heads. Augustus assures the lords that Eldrick has given his word that what they're doing is completely legal. He also tells the lords to stick together as they've the right to set the grain prices, and some brat can't take that away from them. The lords cheer, stating that if they seize this opportunity, their families would stay rich for the next 100 years. Augustus cunningly states that if Rain pushes too hard, then they'll decrease the price just slightly to please him. However, he warns the nobles that if they black out, he'll be really angry. The nobles quickly assure him they have his back. Augustus praises them and orders them to look presentable for Rain's banquet. At Rain's mansion, he's informed of the arrival of Augustus and the other lords. Rain tells his butler to start preparing the food as Augustus and the nobles arrive in rags. Rain eyes their attire, knowing they're all pretenders. Yet he entertains them and asks why they're all so disheveled when they control the food supply. Augustus states that he wants to contribute to the dam construction, while the other lords state how they've contributed large sums of money for the project while also selling their grains at the lowest of prices. Even Lee gets pissed off hearing their blatant lies, but Rain plays along and thanks the nobles for their selflessness. He then tells the nobles he has invited them to discuss business matters with them. Yet before he can get a word in, Augustus fake cries and says they're already at a loss. Rain, however, states that he wants them to raise the price of grain. Shocked, Augustus asks Rain if he really wants to up the price to 4 gold coins. Rain confirms and states that he needs 30% commission. Yet still in disbelief, Augustus tells Rain to reiterate himself, and if he really wants to raise the grain prices to 4 gold per bag. Rain reminds Augustus to not forget that he's entitled to 30% commission as well. Smirking internally, Augustus thinks how he thought Rain was a naive kid, but he's cunning as the rest of them. Thinking Rain's with them, Augustus rejoices. Despite having a man crush for Rain at the moment, Augustus realizes that without an official decree, the civilians will rebel against the merchants. So he quickly thanks Rain and asks him when he's going to make an official announcement. Rain shows him a document and states once they have had dinner, the announcement will be made to the people. He then firmly states that starting tomorrow no one should disobey him, reminding them of Adrian and his family's fate. The merchants quickly assure Rain they'll be his pets. Back at Augustus's mansion, a merchant asks if they should inform Eldrick about this since it's all unusual. Augustus throws his glass in anger and states that the more people know about this, the less they make. He makes it clear to the 3 merchants that the grain prices issue should remain between the 4 of them. The merchant, however, states that it's such a good opportunity that it's hard for him to come to terms with it. Yet he bows his head and accepts Augustus's instructions. Losing his anger, Augustus laughs and says the 4 of them will relish in profits from now on. He also tells the merchants they have much work to do before the announcement goes up. Meanwhile, in his mansion, Rain gets called a traitor by Ayuria, who asks him why he is colluding with the filthy merchants. She also threatens Rain that elves are not to be messed with. Lillian quickly butts in and calms the priestess by telling her to have faith in Rain. Yet Ayuria states that Rain's bluffing them with the sudden price hike. Lillian, steadfast in her faith, states Rain must have a plan. Calming down, Ayuria asks Rain if he's really going to increase the price more. Rain assures Ayuria that she need not to worry as he's confident the price of grain market will drop in less than a month. Ayuria scoffs and calls Rain for thinking the world is rainbows and sunshine, as she's never seen grain prices drop. Rain, tired of Ayuria's bull crap, states that if he had just held a knife to the merchants' throats, the price would have just dropped to 2 coppers, but Ayuria angrily states that he definitely made matters worse because now nobody can afford a single sack of grain. Rain darkly responds that even with 2 gold per bag, People would have starved, so it doesn't matter if the prices have increased. Ayuria stares at him in anger as Rain states that what he's doing isn't to appease the merchants. No, he intends to make the merchants lose everything: their homes, their families, and their livelihoods. 7 days later, Rain teaches Selena about ions, which is too complicated for your dumb mind to understand, but Selena looks at Rain with hard eyes as he wraps up the lessons. Lee then informs Rain that Ayuria is here again. Ticked off, Rain asks if the elf doesn't have anything better to do. Selena chimes in, telling Rain that it's because of the price hike, as the cost of grain has now climbed up to nearly 7 gold per bag. Ayuria enters and rages on Rain, revealing that now not even small nobles can afford grain, let alone commoners. With his poop-eating grin, Rain asks Lee how long has it been since they started raising prices. Lee tells Rain that it has been 7 days. Rain smirks and says it's showtime. Yet still upset, Ayuria chases after Rain, asking him to explain right now or the Elven clan will unfriend him on Facebook. Rain calmly says the reason why he kept her in the dark was to ensure she would act well in front of the nobles. He further tells Ayuria he's going to now explain to her his plan. Rain questions her, asking what's the most lacking thing in Ashling right now. Ayuria quickly says that Ashling doesn't lack in anything, but Rain tells her they're actually lacking in grain merchants. Seeing Ayuria's face, Rain continues by telling her to keep up. He states how the greedy are easily controlled. With the prices of grain raised to 4 gold coins per bag in Ashling, merchants from the surrounding towns are bound to come to Ashling to sell their supplies. The big 4 merchants will definitely rush to buy from those merchants at a higher price, which will further inflate the desires of other grain-selling merchants. Rain reveals how Ashling is practically the food-lacking city in the entire empire. So merchants are bound to lose any rationality, as they will only concern themselves with getting richer. Rain darkly tells Ayuria that after today, the 4 merchants will cease to exist. With that, he hands Lee documents and asks her to post them out. Rain also tells her to spread the news about how Ayuria has decided to sell the church's grain reserves because she couldn't stand his behavior. He also instructs her to tell everyone that the price is 1 gold coin per bag. Once Lee leaves, Ayuria curiously asks Rain why he wants her to have such a great game. Rain says that since he doesn't have any food, he can't sell it. Ayuria responds, saying she doesn't have that much food either, and then scowls at Rain and tells him she wouldn't sell her people's rations. As she tells Rain that the food is for the elves to survive the winters, Selena intervenes and calls her naive. Still chuckling, she advises Ayuria to listen to Rain and sell all the food she has, or she'll lose a lot of money. Ayuria sternly states the elves aren't interested in money, they just need food. Rain, tired, tells Ayuria to just do as he says and her people will have a lot of food by the end. Turning to Selena, Rain tells her he is trusting her and the magical guild to seal the city. Selena assures Rain she would not let a single mouse escape from the city. Now determined, Rain announces it's time for the merchants to pay the price. Later on, Rain notices Lee's face and asks her what's wrong. Lee bluntly states she's worried that things won't go as smoothly, because what if the merchants hold on for a few days and Ayuria's food sells out? Rain then talks about how there are 2 kinds of schemes. One is conspiracy, and the other is called open conspiracy. He says that you can hide from conspiracy, but you can't hide from open conspiracy. The foreign merchants were blinded by desires and came all the way to Ashling. In their hope of getting rich quick, they would also sell out their merchandise to cash out quickly. Meanwhile, Lord Augustus's mansion is in chaos after learning about how the church is selling food reserves for 1 gold coin. The 3 merchants look at Augustus for answers, all panicking about their situation. Augustus calmly says they needn't worry. After all, how much food can a single church provide? He further orders the merchants to sneak in their men and buy the provisions as much as they can. Without further delay, the merchants send their goons to buy multiple bags of grain. Ayuria tells the crowd to calm down, assuring them how the Pope has sent over 100,000 bags of food. Yet the goons instigate the crowd to hoard as much as they can, or else they'll die starving. As the crowd riles up, a soldier steps in, ordering them to behave. He turns to Ayuria and reveals that the Pope will send more food every day, so she needn't worry. Ayuria smiles outside, but cries knowing the soldier is performing an act on behalf of Rain. Then there's also the question of the real Pope finding out, which worries Ayuria. Meanwhile, the foreign merchants realize their deal has gotten messed up because of the church's intervention. One of the merchants even thinks how he went through so much to acquire bags of grain, making him reach the conclusion that he should sell his grain as fast as possible. So he tells the people he's selling for 10 silver coins, causing the civilians to rush to him. The other merchants grit their teeth in anger, and to ensure their money, they announce they're selling for even cheaper prices. Just as Rain had predicted, the prices continue to decline. From above, Rain tells Lee that human nature is unchanging. He talks about how in their minds, the merchants believe selling slowly in comparison to their competitor is financial loss. Pleased by the outcome, Lee states that with his scheme, the grain prices will return to the original price of 50 silver coins per bag. This way, their dam project can be completed without obstruction. Rain calls Lee silly, stating that she's still naive. He announces the moment Augustus and his gang start selling, food would become invaluable to the people of Ashling. Curious, Lee asks Rain if Augustus and the merchants will sell their merchandise the same way as the foreign merchants. She also adds how they brought the grain for more than the market price and also points at how they're loyal to one another. Rain tells Lee she takes the greedy merchants too seriously because when it comes to profits, no one leaves without a fight. With the grain prices already settled down in Ashling, Rain states that it's time to talk to Ayuria for the second half of the deal. Meanwhile, the merchants worriedly tell Augustus how the foreign merchants are lowering their prices like crazy. On of the stupid merchants wonder how it's possible when they control all the grain in Ashling. Augustus hears all of this and finally understands Rain's strategy. He loudly reveals to the other merchants how Rain is hellbent on destroying their families. The other merchants ask Augustus what's going on as he grits his teeth in anger. Augustus realizes how the foreign merchants entered Ashling upon being attracted by the steep prices of food. As the foreign merchants began selling, Rain used the church to sell for cheap, causing a frenzy amongst the merchants who had just arrived. In the end, the foreign merchants had to sell for cheap in order to cut their losses. A lord named Roland cusses Rain for using such a cheap ploy. However, Augustus being shrewd states he has a plan to turn the tides. The lords urge Augustus to share their wisdom, who finally reveals that the food church can only feed Ashling for a few more months. So if they stockpile grain until the people run out, they can once again sell at a higher price. However, for this to work, they must all work together and wait till the day they can reclaim their profits. He warns the nobles that if one of them sells, they're all dead. Noble Roland quickly agrees and states he'll go home right away and seal his food. In reality, Roland thinks about how he must sell his grain before the rest of them catch on. Unbeknownst to them, the other two nobles are onto him. Once they all leave the mansion, Augustus's servant states he'll ask the servants to lock their food supply, but Augustus gets angry and says what if the other nobles sell first. He then orders the servant to sell all their food immediately. Meanwhile, in his mansion, Rain asks Ayuria if the food he's amassed would suffice. The elf looks at the hoard of grain sacks and asks Rain where's so much food coming from. Rain tells Ayuria he told her so as Lillian arrives, informing him how the grain prices have dropped again and now they can buy 3 bags of grain with 1 gold coin. He once again reminds Ayuria how she didn't believe him when he asked her to. He ushers her to buy more while she can, but then asks Ayuria if they can talk about their deal. Ayuria finally calmly asks Rain what kind of deal he'd like to make with the elves. Rain states he'd like to help the elves with everything, from transporting to clothing. He assures Ayuria that he intends to aid the elves with everything if they negotiate with him. Upon hearing Rain, Ayuria tells him that he would need to talk to their queen. Rain waves it off and tells Ayuria to just make the appointment. Understanding the situation, Ayuria calls her subordinate and asks her to give the letter to the queen. Meanwhile, Rain thinks that after the food scheme, the nobles will have to sit quietly for a while. He notes how the magical guild is under his command and soon the church will follow in the guild's steps. However, Eldrick still has the army and the taxes in his hands, and as long as he takes the army in his control, Eldrick will never be able to defy him. Suddenly, Lee coos in Rain's ears, telling him how she'll give him a glazy guzzle to calm him down. However, not wanting to empty his ball, Rain dismisses Lee. Suddenly, they watch a merchant complain to a nun how the soldiers robbed him on the way. Just when he's about to badmouth the Grand Duke, Rain steps in and asks him why he's so riled up. The merchant, so upset, angrily asks Rain who he is. Rain serves face and states he wants to help him out. Meanwhile, a soldier stops Lillian carrying a cart full of goods. When he inquires with her, Lillian reveals the carriage is meant for the elves so they can do business with them. The soldier asks Lillian if she's a merchant. When Lillian says no, the soldier searches and trashes the goods intended for the elves. Lillian tries to fight as the soldier asks for an expensive toll, stating that Rain has raised the taxes. Lillian expresses anger, accusing the soldier of lying in the name of Rain. From the other carriage, Rain tells Lillian to just pay the toll. Once the carriage is allowed through, Rain tells the merchant how this Rain character is bad. The innocent merchant states he shouldn't talk badly about Rain. Hearing this, Rain calls him strange for siding with a master who has raised so much taxes. The merchant assumes the man before him is a newcomer and reveals how Rain helped the civilians with steep food prices. He also admits that while he lost a lot of money in Ashling, he is touched by Rain's kindness for his people. He enthusiastically states he'd die for Rain. Rain tells the merchant how he heard this Rain character murdered nobles at the banquet and even dug up the ground for some project. The merchant firmly states the Eldwin totally deserved that. When Rain inquires further, the merchant states that while people may think the Eldwins made their money from casinos, in truth, they made money from human trafficking. Surprised and irritated, Rain thinks how they already don't have enough people in Ashling. Upon deeper thinking, Rain realizes he must get the border guards under control, otherwise he'll have a civil conflict at hand. Suddenly, the carriage halts as the soldiers demand more tax. Lillian tells the soldier they just paid the taxes in Ashling, but the border guard states the taxes on the borders belong to them. After suppressing her anger, Lillian asks the guard how much is the tax, and he states 1 gold coin. As Lillian lashes out again, Rain orders her to just follow the rules. The guard, noticing this, asks Rain to unveil himself as all travelers must be checked. Rain steps out and tells the guard to do his duty. Is Lee interested in Rain, or is she just doing her duty? Comment, "All hail Master Rain" to find out in part 2. Leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to the channel for similar content. And as always, thanks for watching.